T.S. Eliot famously announced that April is indeed the cruelest month. Bearing that in mind, what consolation, however small, has been mined from this month's listening? Let's find out, shall we? Welcome, classic rock fans, to my second episode of On the Turntable. I will say at this juncture, as I always do, please be sure to click like, subscribe and check that bell so you get notified of any future uploads. And if you appreciate my content, do check out some of the links below this video for ways you can support the work done here at Classic Album Review. Become a Patreon. There's a fine body of work on there now, or simply like the Facebook page. It's all good. So what albums have been on the turntable this April? Well, the first one is this one. This is Fido's Snow Torch. This is a very, very impressive album indeed. It's the latest, I think, from Fido Xavier, who's a multi-instrumentalist. I'm not sure whether to refer to Fido as a band or an individual these days, but nevertheless, the content is absolutely remarkable. This is a stunning piece of prog meandering across oceans and swaths of sound, punctuated by some excellent guitar work and some really, really exquisite vocals as well. There really is an impressive sense of cohesion and conceptual continuity on this record. It's an album awash with exquisite musical phrases and juxtapositions, some wonderful vocal work by Valerie Gracious and Ariel Farber. Crikey, even the names sound sufficiently proggy, don't they? I've been listening to quite a bit of his work recently, and it seems to me he's moved away from the more psychedelic rock textures of the earlier albums to embrace a conceptual grandeur. The title track is split into two parts, of course. It's wonderful, beguiling melodies and music which is complex and stunningly beautiful in equal measure. The transitions and reprises on this record are absolutely stunning. Helix is an interesting number. It feels like a kind of a bridge between the two parts of the title track. And Snow Torch Part 2 begins with that beautifully thrummed guitar before it becomes unashamedly proggy on us once more. Some exquisite and intricate interplay between the instrumentation and vocals. Definitely worth checking out on this one. One can certainly hear the influence of 70s prog on this record, but Fido reconfigures these influences into a gorgeous conceptual expression of his own framing. I'd urge you to buy this album, check it out, because it's absolutely magnificent. The second album that's been on the turntable this April is this one, ELP's first record. I sometimes think this is my favourite ELP album. It easily flip-flops between that and Brain Salad Surgery, depending on what mood I'm in on any given day. Some of you have expressed a preference for the Tankadillo album, but for me this one is a perfect balance between melody and all those beautiful classical pretensions that very much define Emerson, Lake and Palmer's sound. From the chilling opener of The Barbarian to the very nice toned, I have to say, Three Fates, and that's before we get on to the very whimsical and plaintive tones of Lucky Man. I think the buzzword when we're discussing this album is balance. Everything is just perfect, all comes together nicely on this one. There are some dark textures on this record, gothic even, courtesy of Emerson's imposing and larger-than-life organ. Cue Sid James' dirty laugh here. And what's wonderful about this album is it's a perfect balance of all the talents of all three musicians on this. You get impressive licks and classical arpeggios, all thrown into the mix with uncanny ease. I must admit I'm a huge fan of Greg Lake's voice on these early records. I mean, Take a Pebble with that wistful beauty due to his plaintive phrasing is just remarkable, not to mention his note-perfect work he did with King Crimson. There's no doubt that he adds a melodicism and melancholy to the Emerson, Lake and Palmer sound. And of course we must mention the wonderful drumming skills of Carl Palmer and those beautiful classical jazzy flourishes of Keith Emerson. This music is rich, deep and complex, all adding to a very rewarding listening experience. The next album that has been haunting my turntable for April is this one, Miles Davis' A Kind of Blue. If you haven't already, there is a wonderful in-depth review of Bitches Brew on my Patreon. You should check that out. But for me, this record is the epitome of laid-back elegance. The playing is absolutely sublime on this one. It's no doubt, considering the musicians on this record, John Coltrane, Cannibal Adderley, Bill Evans, James Cobb, to name but a few. It's a smoky evocation of the blues, yet conversely, has something one can only describe as distinctly modern about it. Alt Rock Chick has said, if you want to hear what it sounds like when human beings are in perfect sync with each other, then this is it. I love that wonderful use of seventh chords on this record that even inspired Richard Wright to, I think, pinch a chord progression from this album for Pink Floyd's Breathe. This record moves away from the early bop style of jazz via its complex chord progressions. It's built around the concept of modality or modal jazz. I must admit, I absolutely relish the atmosphere of this record. It has a very smoky jazz lounge feel to it. Probably the same reason I really enjoy Sinatra's In the Wee Small Hours. The next one on my list is this one, Jethro Tull's A. Obviously I've been listening to this quite a lot as I've just received it. It's an interesting album. It's one that's not beloved by all Jethro Tull fans. As I've said, it's a bit of a Marmite album. There are those that you just cannot forgive Anderson for moving away from that classic rustic period, that lineup that produced that beautiful trilogy of albums. But as Anderson has pointed out, that this was never meant to be a Jethro Tull record. It was supposed to be a solo album, giving him the scope to explore different sonic territories, shall we say. And he certainly goes all Brian Eno on us. I always used to say that I enjoyed about 40% of this record: Black Sunday, Filing Their Flyers, Crossfire, and the remarkably good Working John, Working Joe. There's a version of that song on this box set without Anderson's vocal double-tracked, and you can just hear the quality of his voice is still very much apparent here. And I'm beginning to enjoy some of the other tracks that ordinarily years ago would have perhaps just skipped. But now I'm beginning to find some interesting musical phrasing, textures, and some brilliant lyrical work by Ian Anderson. And of course there's a wonderful live gig on this box set as well, probably one of the best live concerts on all of these deluxe editions. The version of Black Sunday on this is worth the price of admission alone. The next album is this one, John Lennon and the Plastic Ono Band. This album feels like a continuation of John Lennon's Primal Therapy, and as an audience we share in those cathartic, agonised screams of Mother Don't Go to the litany of disbelief in God. This is a harrowing and unflinchingly honest personal excavation from Lennon. I would even go as far to say this album is groundbreaking. It certainly anticipates all that mawkish whining we got in the 90s, although this record feels far, far more genuine. Lennon here is very much exploring his deepest emotions and trauma with no concessions to the idea of audience. It's incredibly introspective, wherein lies its beauty, of course. We get a mix of rock and rollers and piano ballads. I have to say that Love is one of the most beautifully wistful songs ever consigned to vinyl. It's also an album that brings us Mother, I Found Out, and of course Working Class Hero. Songs with titles like Isolation, God, My Mummy's Dead spell out explicitly what each song is about. In fact, one critic has said, this album maps out his loss of faith in parents, country, friends and idols. Which is true, of course. He casts off these things only to reveal a deeper faith in himself and Yoko. It's like that passage in Corinthians, I put away childish things. The bare bones of trauma are picked over on this one, as well as love acknowledged. It's unflinching, that word again. Some have called it nihilistic. I, however, disagree. I think this record is life-affirming. We all shine on. Anyway, that concludes my episode of On the Turntable for April. I will leave you by saying I hope you're staying safe, keeping warm, but more importantly that you keep listening.